You've been told that if you're kind, if you work hard, and if you treat others with respect, success will follow. That life rewards honesty. That virtue will rise. And so you try to be good. You play by the rules. You act with integrity. But then something happens. You open your eyes to the world around you, and what you see doesn't match what you were promised. The people rising to the top are not the most virtuous, but often the most ruthless. The ones who manipulate, deceive, and dominate. They don't follow the rules, they bend them. They don't ask for permission, they take what they want. Meanwhile, the good are often left behind, struggling, confused, wondering why doing the right thing feels like a punishment. This is the first and most brutal awakening. The world is not fair. And worse, it was never meant to be. This isn't a glitch in the system. It's how the system works. Friedrich Nietzsche understood this. Long before modern psychology or social theory could explain it, Nietzsche saw through the illusion. He knew that morality, the concept of goodness we cling to, is not an absolute. It's a narrative, a tool, a way to make sense of a world that rarely makes sense. But more dangerously, it's often a mechanism of control. When you start to question the gap between what you were told and what you see, you begin to touch the truth. A truth that is as unsettling as it is liberating. The good don't always win. And those who do, they're playing a very different game. A game where the rules are not written in books or taught in school. A game that demands not goodness, but power. And unless you understand this game, you will always be a piece on someone else's board. But what if morality isn't what you think it is? What if everything you were taught to believe about virtue, justice, and fairness was never designed to empower you, but to restrain you? Before you can begin to rise, you must confront this uncomfortable possibility. Because only when the illusion breaks can something greater begin to emerge. In the next chapter, we'll step deeper into the hidden architecture of the world we live in and reveal the silent game of power that most never realize they're already playing. Most people live their entire lives without ever realizing that they're part of a game that started long before they were born. A game with rules so deeply embedded into culture, religion, and education that they feel like truth. But once you start to see the cracks, once you begin to question why the good struggle and the ruthless rise, you step outside the illusion. You start to sense that everything you've been taught about success, about morality, about what it means to live a worthy life, may have been constructed not to empower you, but to keep you in line. Nietzsche saw this game with terrifying clarity. He knew that the world does not reward those who follow the rules. It rewards those who understand which rules are real and which are just stories we tell ourselves. You see, most moral codes weren't created by the strong to uplift others. They were created by the weak to survive. Slave morality, Nietzsche called it, a system of values that glorifies humility, obedience, and self-denial, not because they are inherently noble, but because they keep people docile. Because when the masses believe that suffering is noble and ambition is sinful, they will never rise up. They will never challenge those who wield true power. And so, from the time you're a child, you're taught to be good, to be quiet, to fit in. You're rewarded for submission, not for strength. But what if those values weren't meant for your benefit at all? What if they were meant to ensure that someone else stays in power? Nietzsche wasn't advocating for cruelty. He was calling for awareness, for awakening, for you to recognize that success isn't about being good, it's about understanding the game you're in. And once you see it, once you truly grasp that power moves behind the curtain of culture, you can no longer unsee it. The people who rise in this world aren't necessarily the most talented or the most deserving. They are the ones who stop waiting for fairness and start shaping their own outcomes. In this invisible game, hesitation is defeat, and goodness, without strategy, becomes a cage. But if you're willing to learn, if you're willing to see beyond the illusion, you can begin to play on a different level. A level where morality is not something you inherit, but something you define. In the next chapter, we'll uncover the force that drives this hidden game, the pulse beneath ambition, the truth that Nietzsche believed governs all human action. It's not happiness. It's not peace. It's something far more primal and far more powerful. Strip away the layers of social norms, the rituals of politeness, the endless advice about happiness and balance, and what remains at the core of human nature? Nietzsche's answer was clear, and it was nothing short of revolutionary. At the root of every action, every ambition, every conflict, lies one driving force: the will to power. Not the desire to dominate others, as it is often misunderstood, but the raw, primal urge to shape the world in your own image, to bring your inner vision into reality, to impose meaning where there is none. Nietzsche believed that human beings are not motivated primarily by the pursuit of happiness, as so many modern ideologies suggest. Happiness is a fleeting byproduct, not a purpose. True purpose, he argued, comes from the exercise of will, from expansion, from transformation. And those who deny this drive, those who suppress it in favor of meekness or conformity, don't become virtuous, they become stagnant. This is what sets the winners apart in the hidden game of life. It's not just that they play differently, it's that they understand what game they're playing. They are not chasing peace. They are chasing power. Not to hurt others, but to become something more. To evolve. To rise. And this will to power doesn't always look loud. It doesn't always wear a suit or shout from podiums. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it is the quiet, relentless drive that refuses to give up. The refusal to stay small. The decision, again and again, to push against resistance instead of yielding to it. Nietzsche warned that the suppression of this inner drive is what keeps most people trapped. Because when we are taught that ambition is arrogance, that desire is selfish, that striving is sinful, we are not being guided toward peace. We are being broken, domesticated, made manageable. And slowly, we forget what we're capable of. But the will doesn't die. It waits. It flickers beneath the guilt, beneath the shame, beneath the weight of other people's expectations, waiting for the moment you choose to reclaim it. Because when you do, something changes. The world no longer feels like something that happens to you. It becomes something you shape. You stop asking for direction. You start moving with purpose. And suddenly, your life begins to align with who you really are, not who you were told to be. In the next chapter, we'll explore how this battle between strength and suppression is encoded in the very moral systems that shape our lives, and how Nietzsche divided them into two opposing worlds, one that empowers and one that imprisons. Not all moralities are created equal. Nietzsche proposed that there are two fundamentally different systems of moral values, and understanding them is essential to unlocking the secret of why the worst people succeed while the good struggle. He called them master morality and slave morality, and once you see the distinction, you can't unsee it. Master morality is born from strength. It is the worldview of those who feel powerful, confident, and self-defining. In this morality, good means noble, courageous, and self-reliant. Evil, by contrast, is weakness, timidity, smallness, dependence. It's a morality of creation, where the individual defines their own values based on internal strength. Slave morality, on the other hand, is born from weakness. It arises among those who feel oppressed, overpowered, or helpless. In this system, good becomes whatever eases suffering: humility, obedience, meekness. And evil? Anything that threatens the collective, especially power, pride, or ambition. Slave morality is a defense mechanism. It flips the script of power to justify powerlessness. Nietzsche saw how this shift had shaped entire civilizations. Instead of aspiring to strength, people were taught to glorify submission. Instead of being told to rise, they were told that salvation lay in suffering. And the result is clear: a society that rewards passivity while punishing anyone who dares to stand apart. Have you ever noticed how quickly people are labeled selfish for pursuing greatness? How ambition is called arrogance? How standing firm in your truth is seen as stubbornness or even cruelty? These are not coincidences. They are the echo of a morality built to suppress the will to power. And worst of all, most people don't even realize it's happening. They internalize these values. They carry them like sacred truths. And as a result, they sabotage themselves. Not because they lack ability, but because they've been trained to feel guilt for using it. They shrink their dreams. They dilute their voices. They choose safety over expression. And they wonder why life feels so small. Nietzsche's brilliance was not in condemning morality, but in exposing its hidden architecture. He didn't tell you to reject all values, he told you to ask who created them and why. Do these values serve your growth, or do they serve the systems that profit from your silence? Once you begin to ask those questions, the foundations start to shake, and the chains you thought were virtue begin to look a lot more like fear. In the next chapter, we'll explore how these chains are kept in place not by force, but by something far more subtle and far more effective: guilt. The quiet voice that keeps you from rising. The invisible cage that makes you hesitate when you're meant to act. Not all prisons have walls. Some are built from thoughts, quiet, invisible, and deeply internalized. And perhaps the most insidious of them all is guilt. Guilt for wanting more. Guilt for standing out. Guilt for believing, even for a moment, that you were meant for something greater. From a young age, most people are taught to suppress their desires. They're told not to be too proud, not to aim too high, not to outshine others. And so, they learn to shrink. Not because they lack potential, but because they fear what might happen if they truly expressed it. Nietzsche saw guilt as a mechanism of control, a mental leash that keeps individuals obedient long after the need for enforcement disappears. It's what stops people from applying for the job they want, speaking the truth they believe, or taking the risk that might change their lives. Not because they can't, but because they think they shouldn't. They believe wanting more is wrong. That ambition is ego. That power corrupts. And so, they hold back. They settle. They silence themselves. And in doing so, they participate in their own diminishment. This guilt doesn't appear as panic or fear. It appears as hesitation, as second-guessing, as a quiet voice asking, "Who do you think you are?" It's the internalized voice of slave morality designed to keep the strong from realizing their strength. But what if that voice is lying? What if wanting more is not a flaw, but a signal? What if your longing is not arrogance, but alignment? Nietzsche believed that guilt is not a moral compass. It's a cultural implant, one that must be removed if you are to become who you truly are. Because as long as guilt governs your choices, you are not living, you are complying. The irony is, the worst people often feel the least guilt. That's part of why they rise. They do not ask for permission. They do not wait for approval. They act. They move. They take. And while they may lack virtue, they often possess something far more effective in this world: clarity. Meanwhile, the good hesitate. Not because they are unworthy, but because they have been trained to be unsure, to second-guess their voice, to delay their dreams. And so they remain stuck, not because of external barriers, but because of an internal belief that they must play small to be good. But what if you could shed that belief? What if you stopped apologizing for your fire and started using it to light the way forward? In the next chapter, we'll explore exactly why the ruthless often win, not because they are better, but because they are willing to do what others won't. And what you can learn, not from their cruelty, but from their clarity. It's an uncomfortable truth, but one you've likely sensed for a long time. The ruthless often win. They ascend to power, accumulate wealth, influence decisions, and shape the narrative. But here's what most people miss. They don't win because they're smarter. They don't win because they're more talented. They win because they act without hesitation. While others overthink, they move. While others doubt, they decide. While others wait, they take. And in a world that rewards action more than intention, that is often all it takes. Nietzsche understood this dynamic with brutal clarity. He saw how the good, those who live by principle and conscience, often hesitate. Not because they are weak, but because they are burdened by internal conflict. They wonder if they're being selfish. They fear being misunderstood. They ask themselves if they're allowed to step forward. And in that pause, the moment is lost. The opportunity is seized by someone who simply didn't ask. This is not a call to abandon ethics. It's a call to stop being paralyzed by them. Morality should be a guide, not a cage. But for many, it becomes exactly that, a set of invisible rules that delay every bold move, that cast doubt on every dream, that punish the very instinct to rise. The ruthless don't suffer from this paralysis. They act with certainty, not because they are right, but because they don't wait to be told they are. They don't need approval. They don't need reassurance. They've learned that the world doesn't reward goodness, it rewards decisiveness. And so they step forward. They speak up. They claim space. And while their methods may be flawed, their mindset contains a lesson. Not in cruelty, but in clarity. Because clarity about who you are, what you want, and what you're willing to do is power. The tragedy is that so many good people have that power within them. But they've been taught to dim it, to downplay their strength, to defer to others. And so they stay stuck, watching those with less conscience but more conviction rise. But what if you could change that? What if you could bring the fire of your principles and pair it with the clarity of action? What if you stopped waiting to be deemed ready and started becoming undeniable? In the next chapter, we'll meet the figure Nietzsche believed embodied this rare fusion of power and purpose, the Übermensch. Not a tyrant, but a creator. A human who dares to define their own meaning and lives it without apology. What happens when you stop living according to borrowed values? When you stop asking what the world expects of you and start asking what your soul demands? Nietzsche believed that answering this question doesn't just change your life, it changes your identity. Because the person who asks it sincerely is on the path to becoming something rare, something powerful. He called this person the Übermensch, the Overman. Not a tyrant, not a conqueror, but a creator. Someone who rises above the illusions of imposed morality and becomes the author of their own meaning. The Overman is not defined by rebellion alone, but by redefinition. They don't just reject the values of the masses, they create values that reflect who they truly are. While others seek safety and conformity, the Overman seeks truth and self-expression. And that truth, for Nietzsche, is not found in comfort. It's found in the act of becoming. Becoming more than you were yesterday. More than what society says you're allowed to be. More than the fear that has shaped your choices until now. This isn't easy. In fact, it's one of the hardest things a human can do. Because it means walking away from certainty, from approval, from the script that everyone else is following. It means stepping into the unknown, not with recklessness, but with responsibility. The Overman doesn't wait for the world to hand them purpose. They carve it from stone. They craft it from suffering. They forge it from fire. They know that life has no inherent meaning, and they don't collapse under that truth. They rise above it. They create meaning, not just for themselves, but as a model of what humanity can become when it refuses to be tamed. Nietzsche believed that most people would never become overmen, not because they're incapable, but because they lack the will to break free. They choose comfort over growth, familiarity over freedom, and in doing so, they remain trapped in cycles that offer security but rob them of transcendence. But the few who dare to rise, who dare to ask deeper questions, to face deeper fears, those few become the torchbearers of what is possible. The Übermensch is not a fantasy. It is a mirror, a challenge, a reminder that your highest potential is not behind you, but ahead, waiting for the day you stop asking for meaning and start building it. In the next chapter, we'll explore the very crucible where that transformation begins. Not in ease or victory, but in pain. Because Nietzsche believed that suffering isn't something to be escaped. It's something to be mastered. In a world obsessed with comfort, Nietzsche dared to say the unthinkable. Suffering is essential, not just inevitable, not just tolerable, but necessary. It is the crucible through which strength is born, the fire that burns away illusion, the pressure that forges authenticity. While society teaches us to avoid pain at all costs, Nietzsche urged us to walk straight into it, not as victims, but as alchemists. Because suffering, when faced with courage, becomes something else entirely. It becomes fuel. Think about it. Every moment of real growth in your life, every breakthrough, every transformation was preceded by struggle, discomfort, doubt, loss. These were not obstacles on the path. They were the path. Nietzsche believed that those who rise are not those who avoid suffering, but those who use it. They don't run from difficulty. They embrace it. They understand that pain, properly harnessed, sharpens the will, refines the vision, clarifies what truly matters. But modern culture tells us the opposite. It sells us comfort as the highest goal, a painless life as the pinnacle of achievement. And in doing so, it weakens us. It strips us of resilience. It teaches us that if something hurts, it must be wrong. But Nietzsche asked, what if pain is not the problem? What if it's the teacher? What if running from it is what keeps us fragile? The Übermensch, the person who rises above herd morality, doesn't seek suffering, but they don't fear it either. They use it. They turn heartbreak into wisdom, failure into insight, rejection into redirection. They see every wound not as a scar to hide, but as a story of becoming. And here lies the great divide. The weak avoid discomfort and remain the same. The strong endure it and become more. This is not about glorifying pain. It's about reclaiming your power to choose what it means, to take what was meant to break you and turn it into the foundation of your strength. Nietzsche knew that the worst kind of suffering is the one without meaning. But when you choose your suffering, when you let it shape you, instead of shame you, it becomes sacred. In the next chapter, we'll explore one of the most misunderstood forces in life, power. Not the kind that dominates others, but the kind that liberates the self. Because power, like pain, is not the enemy. Misunderstanding it is. For most of your life, you've been told that power is dangerous, that it corrupts, that to seek it is to risk losing your soul. And so, you've kept your ambitions quiet. You've dimmed your light. You've watched others rise while telling yourself that you're above the game. That being good is more important than being strong. But Nietzsche saw through this illusion. He knew that power itself is not evil. It's neutral. It is a force like fire or gravity capable of creation or destruction depending on how it is used. To fear power is to misunderstand it, and those who misunderstand it are doomed to be ruled by those who don't. Because someone will always claim it. If not you, then someone else. And while you hesitate, others build empires. While you question, others decide. While you wait, others move. This is not about becoming ruthless. It's about becoming responsible. It's about realizing that power is already inside you, buried beneath guilt, fear, and the belief that wanting more makes you bad. Nietzsche challenged this belief. He asked, what if your desire to rise is not arrogance, but alignment? What if your hunger to shape the world is not vanity, but vision? What if your reluctance to claim power is the very reason you feel powerless? The truth is, the most dangerous people are not the ones who seek power, they are the ones who wield it without understanding. And the most tragic people are not the ones who fail, but the ones who never even try because they were taught that power belongs to someone else. Nietzsche's philosophy is not about domination. It's about self-creation, about becoming the kind of person who doesn't wait for permission to live with purpose. The kind who doesn't need to oppress others to rise, but also doesn't apologize for rising. You can be powerful and compassionate, strong and ethical, ambitious and grounded. These qualities are not contradictions, they are complements. But only if you stop seeing power as the enemy and start seeing it as a tool. One that must be wielded with wisdom. One that requires clarity, not shame. Because when you step into your power, not to control others, but to command yourself, your habits, your time, your voice, you stop being a spectator of your life and start becoming its architect. In the final chapter, we'll confront the ultimate decision. Will you continue living by the rules designed to keep you small, Or will you finally rise and claim the life that's been waiting for you to take it? There comes a moment in every life when the excuses no longer hold, when the waiting ends, when the illusion of being a good person isn't enough to mask the quiet ache of untapped potential. That moment is now. You've seen how the world works, not as a place that rewards virtue, but one that responds to clarity, courage, and power. You've learned how morality can be used as a leash, how guilt can keep you from moving, how suffering, when owned, becomes fuel, and how power, when understood, becomes liberation. So the question remains, will you rise? Or will you remain exactly where you've been watching, hoping, hesitating, while others live the life you know you're capable of? No one is coming to choose you. No one is coming to hand you permission. Because the truth is, permission was never theirs to give. It has always been yours. Power is not something external that you have to steal or earn from others. It is the quiet decision to stop living by rules that were never yours. It is the choice to stop shrinking, to stop seeking approval, to stop apologizing for wanting more. And the moment you make that decision, something inside you shifts. You stop being at the mercy of circumstance. You stop being molded by fear. You begin to build not just a different life, but a different self. A self that leads instead of follows, that acts instead of waits, that creates meaning instead of borrowing it. This is what Nietzsche called becoming. Not achieving a final form, but engaging in a lifelong act of self-authorship. Because the greatest tragedy is not failure, it's never starting. The greatest risk is not falling, it's never rising. And the greatest power is not control over others, it's sovereignty over yourself. So as this chapter ends, your real story begins. One you don't inherit. One you don't imitate. One you write with your own hand. And if this journey awakens something in you, if even a part of you is ready to stop playing small, then let this moment be the line you cross. Step into it. Own it. Rise. And if this message spoke to something inside you, if it stirred a part of you long silent, share it. Let others feel what you just felt. Because the more of us who rise, the less the world can keep us small. Like, comment, and subscribe if you're ready to become the author of your own meaning and never let anyone write your story for you again.